here has heard of Agenda 21. What about smart growth? What about comprehensive plans? Okay, so I am going to tell you all about those three things tonight. I'm going to show you how your comprehensive plan is implementing the Sustainable Development Goals laid out in the United Nations Agenda 21-2030. And as Lou said, it's not a conspiracy. It is indeed here in America, disguised in your comprehensive plan, controlled by your city council, and comprised of two ideas: to move everyone into smart cities, and then to rewild the rest of the American landscape. Agenda 21 is a United Nations societal transformation and social engineering program with a global scope. It is the blueprint to inventory, control, and monitor all aspects of industry, banking, transportation, health, food, education, construction, and every other aspect of your life under the noble banner of saving the earth. We got started with under President George H.W. Bush in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. 5 months later, President Bill Clinton created the President's Council on Sustainable Development, where they wrote rules to gradually return private land to the government. And with the help of Al Gore, they implemented Agenda 21 into every department of the federal government. This is one of two major things the council accomplished. The second was to provide millions of dollars in taxpayer funding to the American Planning Association, the APA, to create a legislative guidebook called Growing Smart. It took 9 years to create and contains sample legislation, ordinances, rules, and regulations to incorporate the Sustainable Development Goals into city planning across the country. By 2002, this guidebook was in every state and federal planning department and is still used as the textbook for all urban and rural planning degrees. So, J. Gary Lawrence was the advisor to President Clinton for the council. And in his publication, The Millennium Papers, he predicted there would be significant opposition to Agenda 21. You're welcome to read the quote, but for time's sake, I'm just going to summarize it. He basically said Agenda 21 is happening in America. We just don't call it that because it's tied to those crazy conspiracy theorists. So instead of calling it Agenda 21 here in America, we call it comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. So comprehensive planning, it's also known as a master plan, a land use comprehensive plan, and as many areas here in Wisconsin call it a smart growth plan. Your local officials will call it a comp plan. It is the business plan for how your city council plans your area. And according to the APA, comprehensive planning is a process to create a more prosperous, convenient, equitable, healthy, and attractive place for present and future generations. These plans lay the foundation for zoning codes, which is the legal tool for how these comprehensive plans are achieved. And everyone sitting in this room has one. Doesn't matter if you're in a rural area or a big urban city. All of these plans are focused on the same three goals, which is smart growth or growth management, environmental protections, and agriculture preservation. And all of these plans have 5 themes that dictate how plans are decided. So the number one guiding principle for comprehensive planning is sustainable development, defined by the UN's Brundtland Commission as development that meets the needs of current generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And who can be against that, right? That's wonderful.
I can.
What it actually means is everything you do must be tied to responsible, sustainable practices, that we must nurture peace consistently by being environmentally friendly, and that we must establish harmonious relationships with Mother Earth by conserving planet Earth's natural resources. This is actually the worship of the created things instead of the creator.
That's right.
And it's because of the created things that you must give up your right to own and use property to save the environment. The second principle is community. It's basically communism, they would call it community. It's where the rights of the individual must be balanced with the rights of the community. Many of your comprehensive plans state that exact definition. And in case you weren't aware, the community's rights will always be greater than the right of the individual. And depending on the issue or circumstance, your community could be your town, your neighborhood, your state, your nation, the global community. This is your Think Global, Act Local. The third principle is quality of life, which means that government must ensure you feel good about your social belonging, your physical, mental, and spiritual health, education, work status, your wealth, your work environment, and your physical surroundings, and that you have a sense of security and safety. And according to a UN's report, an agenda for disarmament, you owning a firearm wipes out everybody else's sense of safety and security. And equity, which means all sectors of society must be diverse and inclusive. The APA states that comprehensive planning involves redistribution of public resources and facilities, making equity an inescapable fact of city planning. What this actually means is that people of all income levels will live together and all residents will share ownership over the land. And the last principle is resilience, which is the climate change aspect of these plans. Many counties have this in a whole plan of its own, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. And all of these plans dictate how the 10 required elements are planned for. For Wisconsin law, these are the 10 required elements that all comprehensive plans must have. The first element is existing conditions. This is where every aspect of your city is inventoried, which makes sense, because how can they control everything if they don't know what they have? What's inventoried is the next 7 elements: your area demographics, economy, housing, transportation, public services, environmental conditions, and existing land uses. The 9th element is the implementation chapter, how they will achieve the goals laid out in the previous chapters. This is where you'll find the instructions for your city council to the ordinances, rules, regulations they need to adopt. Compare the future land use map to your current zoning map to get an idea of how much your area is going to change. And all of this is being done with 4 tactics. And no matter where you live, Illinois or Wisconsin, every single plan in the country all rely on these 4 tactics to achieve their stated goals. Public-private partnerships are used to control business and non-governmental organizations, your NGOs. Without the public-private partnerships, these comprehensive plans wouldn't even get off the ground. Smart growth is how 15-minute cities are created. The Wildlands Network, which is formerly the Wildlands Project, their goal is to return 50% of America to pre-settlement conditions. And the last tactic is regionalism, because as every step of this process continues to be achieved, all local control will be relinquished to regional control. And if this is achieved, we will no longer be gathering like this, because America and our Constitution will be just a blimp in the history book. But this agenda started long ago, started long before we existed, because at the root of it is a spiritual war. It's not a cultural one. And in Genesis 1:28, God said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And because communism rebrands what the Lord commands as good, you can't subdue and fill the earth. That's selfish, and you must be rooted in. And that brings us to the first tactic, which is Smart growth, it's often referred to as growth management or new urbanism. It's based off of the 1991 Iowani principles, which were the original blueprint for elected officials and city planners, and it also paved the way for the smart growth movement. The terms around that wheel are the terms in your comprehensive plan for smart growth. Actually, a lot of our plans call them growth management. The main goal of smart growth is to stop the growth of suburbs caused by urban sprawl by directing all new development to city centers. To fill the earth and subdue it is what God commanded us to do, and that is the very thing that smart growth was created to stop. The UN describes smart growth as the centralized control of every aspect of urban life: energy and water use, housing stock and allocation, control of population levels, control of public health and dietary choices, social justice, the merging of social issues with our justice system, all education, including homeschooling, control over transportation modes, along with personal vehicles, where you are allowed to travel, and how long you can travel for, along with a cap and trade on business and economics activities, which is a system for controlling carbon. This is where ESG and the social credit scores make their entrance. But before smart growth can be created, there's 3 of these principles that must be in place first before the rest of them can start. You need stakeholder collaboration, because again, without the public-private partnerships pushing this agenda forward, it wouldn't go anywhere. The next is direct development, because for development to be directed to city centers, your local city council has to change zoning. And the third is transportation choices, referred to in your comprehensive plans as transit-oriented development, pedestrian-friendly, or walk-bike focus. This requires development to be built along current and future public transportation modes. There doesn't actually have to currently be any transportation options. It only needs to be planned to be built. And once your city has all of those 3 in place, the rest of these principles can come to fruition. And I'm going to explain the actual definition of some of these, because your comprehensive plans do not. Mixed land use, this is a zoning term where the bottom level is retail and the remaining floors are apartments or condos. Compact building design, this is where developers build up and not out. Included in this are specific design standards for buildings, a list of approved building materials, curb setbacks, how far your building is allowed to sit from the curb, among other requirements. Various housing options, called affordable housing. This is where all income levels will live together. The poor and the rich, the young and the old, handicapped and mentally ill will all live together to create a diverse and equitable community. And walkable neighborhoods. These are also referred to as walkable communities, live, work, play communities. This is just your 15-minute city rebranded. All city centers and edges will be defined. And the Iowani principles state that these communities will be permanently surrounded by green belts or other protected lands. And lastly, attractive communities. How this is all about the aesthetics of your town. Is it cute? Does it have a hometown feel? Is there a pretty sign when you come into the city? Are all of the driveways and parking spaces and alleys behind the house? City planners say that this smart growth planning is the only thing we have left to save humanity. That it's because of us and our middle class lifestyle that created suburbs, creating climate change. And the more suburbs that are created, the more roads that are built, the more cars that drive on the roads, the more roads that are needed to be upkept. And all of this is the next reason why we have to start planning our city around smart growth. And it's also the cost-effective principle, because it is just too expensive to pave all of those country and suburban roads to provide emergency services, school buses, infrastructure. This aspect is one of the main reasons as to why our cities are being planned around these principles. So if the box on the left describes your current lifestyle, and you refuse to submit to our gracious overlords and move into a city, they will bring the city to you. If you live in a suburb, your future suburb is on the right. It's called a 20-minute suburb. Everything you need will be available within a 20-minute walk or bike ride. And for this to come to fruition, your elected officials must pave the way for the transformation of your car-dependent suburb into a car-less suburb, which means that single-family zoning must be eliminated and replaced with multifamily housing or mixed-use zoning. And if it's not completely eliminated, they'll amend the zoning statute to allow property owners to build accessory dwelling units. And to show you that this is already being done, in 2018, Minneapolis became the first major city in the US to eliminate single-family zoning. Texas, California, Oregon, Washington, those states have all followed suit. Those who are advocating for the destruction of single-family neighborhoods give one reason and one reason only. Does anybody know what it might be?
Climate change.
That's kind of secondary, but that's one of them. But the main one,
Equity.
it's racist. It's racist. That single-family zoning is a national standard to circumvent laws that prohibit racial discrimination in housing, and that it was invented by white supremacists to maintain all white neighborhoods.
Can I just ask a clarification question?
Okay, sir?
When you're saying single-family housing has been removed from those states in the red, that means there is no zoning to support people building communities with single-family housing?
Correct.
I challenge that in Texas at least.
All new neighborhoods is what they say.
So you
This is 9 months of research, and it has been vetted by a few other people to make sure that everything is
they're not
truthful.
building any new neighborhoods with single-family housing in the state of Texas.
In major cities, I don't know about out in the country, but in all of the major cities in Texas, they eliminated single-family zoning. And many other states and major cities have as well. So once single-family zoning is eliminated, the rest of the smart growth principles are ready to start, are ready to come to fruition, and your neighborhood will start being changed whether you like it or not. Your comprehensive plan calls it infill development, infill replacement, and suburban retrofitting, which is building additional homes on underutilized lots called accessory dwelling units, ADUs. This is how single-family neighborhoods are transitioning into multifamily neighborhoods. All new construction will match existing height and scale of current homes, along with other design standards, so everything matches and looks pretty. This is the attractive community principle. So the question you'll have to answer is, do you want to become a landlord, or do you want to sell part of your property? And now you might not do any of this, but are your neighbors in the same boat, or the developer who buys the house next door? Now, real estate is fundamental to the American way of life, and the number one way the middle class passes wealth down to other generations. And if it's eliminated, it will lead to the loss of our Constitution, our God-given liberties, and our country as we know it. The graphic you see was created by a planning department to show us how we can change our single-family lot into a multifamily lot. And notice how there are no driveways. None at all, which brings us to the second fundamental aspect of the American way of life. Our personal vehicles. Because this elimination leads to the loss of our mobility. And this is why car lanes have already started being replaced with devoted bike lanes or bus lanes, rail lanes. This has been happening across the country, and this is your comprehensive plan at work. And once you remove a car lane, traffic congestion increases. Imagine that, which is where step 2 comes in, the implementation of traffic calming measures to reduce congestion created by removing a car lane. The main one that they're doing is instituting congestion pricing. Manhattan instituted this a couple months ago. So now, on top of all of the tolls you have to pay to drive into New York City, you now have to pay another $24 if you want to drive into Manhattan. This is called congestion pricing. And it doesn't matter really if it's an electric car or a gas-powered, fuel-powered car, it's still another resource-dependent vehicle on the road. And if you haven't figured it out, everything comes back to protecting the environment, the worship of the created things. So here is a news clip I found.
Today, St. Petersburg City Council members could make drastic changes to the number of homes that can be built on a single lot. And on your side, Beth Rousseau joins us now live from St. Pete this morning with the reason thousands of residents are worried about the City Council approving this measure. Good morning, Beth.
Hey, Chris, and this is a plan that city leaders say has been in the works for years, and they say it really could go a long way to address affordable housing issues, which they talk about here at City Hall all the time. However, 3,000 residents have signed a petition, and they say they're concerned for a number of reasons.
Where are these people going to park? Yes, they're going to then start intruding into the neighborhood, and if they have friends or family over, they're going to be parking into the neighborhoods, blocking the alleys.
The plan City Council is considering allows up to 4 residential units to be built on a single family lot, and this is within 175 feet of the center line of major streets like 15th and 22nd Avenue South. Occupants would then access their parking through alleys behind those homes. City leaders tell us that the price per square foot would be much more affordable than those detached single family homes that we typically see in those neighborhoods.
What's key to this is that we have design standards so that the scale, the height of these buildings is consistent with single-family homes.
So did you recognize a lot of those as smart growth principles? So it starts with rezoning, and it ends with the last principle of smart growth.
Today, St. Petersburg.
To protect the environment. These are classified in your comprehensive plan as open spaces, agriculturally sensitive areas, and environmentally sensitive areas and agricultural lands. Your plans don't go into what each of these means because frankly they never would have been approved. So I will go into what each of these means. So open spaces are considered no-build zones, which means you are prohibited from erecting any structure or building in order to preserve natural resources and natural features. Natural features include all areas with natural terrain, areas with vegetation, aquifer recharge and discharge areas, slopes with a 25% or more incline, all water courses, among many other. Just note that vegetation includes all plants, weeds, and grasses. Open spaces include all land and water in a predominantly natural state, land and water devoted to an open space on the future land use map, or land that is not currently occupied by a structure. Environmentally sensitive areas are no build zones and no disturb zones. A no disturb zone prohibits the disturbance, removal, or altering of existing natural features or the ground. We call this tilling. And agricultural lands prohibit high density development. They require houses to be built on small lots called a cluster subdivision, which is the photo you see. It will also limit all non-farm uses. Now it doesn't matter if the land is currently being farmed, it only matters what that land is zoned for on the future land use map. And as you read your plan, it will sound warm and fuzzy because a communist's favorite tactic is to change the definition. The APA created a dictionary for city planners called the Planner's Dictionary. It's almost 400, it's 467 pages, and I read the whole thing, so you don't have to. And if you're interested in kind of going in more of the definitions of these plans, email me and I'm happy to send it to you. So under the guise of protecting the environment, our government has been manipulated at every level to enact rules and regulations to protect the earth from you. Because you are unsustainable. We are unsustainable. Everything we do is unsustainable. Private wells, septic systems, raising and eating cattle, hunting and fishing, electricity, home heating and cooling, fences, CO2, natural resources, dust and dirt. Some of these are kind of funny. Also included is any water drainage obstruction. So your gutter has to go. Noise, vibration, glares, any smoke, gas connections, soot, fly ash, odors, anything depriving the enjoyment of human, plant, or animal life. Pretty vague, huh? If it's an attractive nuisance to children, solid and liquid refuse and waste, and it makes you stop to think, how is this being done? Because I know some progressive leftists, and they're not calling for the elimination of AC and heating. And I know most of our city council members across the country enjoy being cool in the middle of summer. So how is this being pushed along? And it really all comes back to these public-private partnerships. I like to classify the NGOs into two different buckets. Those with police powers and those without police powers. Both use environmental policies as grounds for lawsuits. Those with police powers include the American Planning Association, your state, regional, and local planning boards and agencies. Many states have given this group power to make laws and write rules and ordinances. And in a lot of states, many planning departments receive permits first, and they then pass it on to the city council with their recommendations on how they should vote. And those without police powers are your environmental, social, and progressive nonprofits. They're usually single advocacy groups. They input themselves into your community, or they find someone local and start lobbying your city council members, and they make it seem like there's a lot of people in the community who want these policies and these initiatives. They are receiving billions of dollars of our money a year to lobby for smart growth at the local, state, and federal levels, and then corporations can then start building out these smart cities. This is the main avenue to implement the goals in your comprehensive plan, and we are funding this and funding the destruction of our country. These public-private partnerships will tell us where we can live, how we can live, where we're not allowed to live, and it'll look something like this. This is the Biosphere Reserve. It was created to eliminate the human presence on the majority of the American landscape, and then to heavily control human activity on the rest. The blue circle in the middle is the core zone, called a wilderness area in your comprehensive plan. And I'm going to say both terms, so when you read wilderness area in your plan, you will know it is the core zone. This includes national parks, sanctuaries, preserves, conservations, and other plant and animal habitats. All human activity, human habitation, and human use is prohibited in this zone. Surrounding the core zone or wilderness area is the buffer zone, which is the light green circle. Its purpose is to protect the core zone. Human access in this zone is limited and strictly controlled. Allowable activities include restoration, ecotourism, environmental education with very limited recreation. And the only part of this you really need to be concerned about is this outer area, the transition zone, or the zone of cooperation. This is where we get to live. Everything we do will have conservation and management skills applied. Activities in this zone are human settlements, farmlands, managed forest, intensive recreation, and various economic uses. Your comprehensive plan does not use the term transition zone. Instead, they state that this is an area where people can live and achieve sustainable development in harmony with nature. Doesn't that make you feel good? Do you see now how your city council has been moved into these plans? The majority of your council members who've never read them. I was talking with a couple members of the Kenosha Council. Not one of their members have read their comprehensive plan. So the Biosphere Reserve is part of the Wildlands Network, and the goal is to return 50% of America to pre-settlement conditions. And it looks like, and it'll look like a map that's coming up. So they're not going to show up to your front door and escort you off your property with, like a barrel of a gun. First, they're going to try to bribe you to put your property into a conservation easement. They're offering lots and lots of money to property owners right now to do this. And I'll come back to this one in a moment. But if you refuse a conservation easement, they will find an environmental regulation to use to try to sue you from using your property. And they also have been using sue and settle. This really started under Obama. Trump put a stop to it, and Biden has started it back up. It's where someone from the Bureau of Land Management calls his buddy at the Sierra Club and says, you should sue us for this reason, and we're gonna settle. So this is how some of these environmental policies have become stronger and stronger over the years. And the Center for American Progress is another NGO and is the brainchild behind the rewilding movement. This is their blueprint, and it's a roadmap equipped with policy recommendations to rewild America. A few of their suggestions include to create national monuments, establish new wildlife refuges, to identify in advance local land conservation priorities, while lobbying Congress to pass accompanying legislation. So going back to conservation easements, because in my opinion, this is kind of the worst of the three. And for landowners across the country are all putting, oh my goodness, there's dozens and dozens a day of people putting their land in an easement. And all an easement does is restrict you, the landowner, from the ability to use your land as you see fit. Because what you've done is you've sold off your private property rights to a conservation organization or developer who then monitors and enforces the restrictions set forth in the agreement, and you are basically a guest in your own home. Because the easement holder can impose limitations and obligations on the landowner, they can require you to retain and protect natural, scenic, and open spaces. They can restrict your movement on your property, prohibit the construction of buildings and other structures. They can restrict you from grazing animals or hunting, from removing any vegetation or creating any type of disturbance to the ground. They can force you to take down fences and padlocks because that causes fragmentation of the habitat, and it restricts the bears and the wolves from being reunited to their cousins to the north and the south. This is actually a meme from a Facebook group of city planners. And, if you're upset about this, about what they're doing in your backyard, don't worry, because pretty soon you won't have a backyard. A NIMBY is not in my backyard. So we're NIMBYs when we show up to our city council or planning meetings to oppose any of the changes being implemented. So what lands are city planners trying to protect from you? So what is considered protected? I found a lot of this information reading the dictionary. So all bodies of water, floodplains, wetlands, shorelines, soils, scenic views, green belts, all animal habitations, land and preservations, you have prairies, all vegetation. And so how does this affect you? Well, do you have a creek or stream or pond on your property? Is your property in the path of a 100-year flood? Because if so, it's considered a floodplain. Are there any type of plant or wildlife, fish habitats on your property? Or does your house sit on top of a hill that has a 25% or more incline with a pretty scenic view? Well, if you answered yes to any of those, you live in a protected land.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, really, how? It's pretty selfish for you to keep that view to yourself. And so, to show you that this isn't just happening in America, but it is a worldwide agenda, and protecting the environment is a worldwide goal. They don't care how many people starve in the process of waging war on our farmers, and if they succeed, we won't be the first people to starve under communist rule. And speaking of communists, the Council on Foreign Relations are some of the loudest voices in the goal to protect 30% of the world's land and water by 2030. And as you can see from their map, America is a little behind. And that's because we, the people, own the land, which is why Biden signed 30 by 30 as an executive order. Now, this ability for the average person, the average citizen to be a landowner is the very thing that made America the greatest country in the world, and this is what is at stake. The ability for you to own and use your property as you see fit, the ability for you to pass those assets down to your children and their children. This is fundamental to our God-given liberties and is the very heart of our Constitution. And without this right, we are serfs. And what will America look like when we no longer have that ability? The Wildlands map. Any of y'all remember this? This was brought out in front of Congress back in the 90s, like this big, huge poster where a lot of this agenda was pushed back. This is what they want America to look like. This is the Wildlands map back when the Wildlands Network was the Wildlands Project. And if you remember the Biosphere Reserve, this is just the zoomed out version of what this will look like. So your red are your core reserves, your human-free zones. The buffer zones are in yellow. And if you can see the little bit of green, that's where we'll get to live. So these conservation easements and environmental protections are not about protecting the earth or the wildlife, but they're a tool to get landowners to voluntarily sell their private property rights so this map can come to fruition. This is an all-out unrestrained assault on rural landowners by limiting every aspect of land use, by taxing you to death, to cancel your homeowner's insurance or refuse to insure your property in the first place, or to rezone your property as a floodplain or a wetland, reducing the value to virtually nothing. And it's happening across the country every day. Every day, there's hundreds of Americans who are putting their property into easements. These NGOs and land trusts are receiving millions of dollars every year from taxpayers for the sole purpose of purchasing conservation easements across the country. These NGOs come into your community and they're actually lying to landowners. They're telling them you can continue using your property as you see fit, nothing will change. This is all over their websites, and the landowners are finding out it's a different story. And the landowners who have bought these easements in court and have won are still required to pay all court costs and fees for the other party. And to show you how massive this problem is, I want to show you or introduce you to the Nature Conservancy. According to their latest 990, from 2014 to 2021, they received a little over $1.5 billion from we the people to purchase the private property rights of Americans across the country. They have $7.5 billion in assets, $4.9 billion in conservations. They're partners with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the United Nations. They also fund planning associations, commissions, and local government departments across the country. Nothing would happen without these public-private partnerships. In the same year, they paid $7.5 million to lobby our government. So they receive our money and then turn around and spend millions to ensure that money keeps flowing. They also lobby for climate change adoption at the state, federal, and international level. We are funding this agenda through this one organization alone, internationally to the tune of $3.5 billion internationally. And if that doesn't grind your gears, it gets worse. So once they have these assets, right, they get you to put your property into a conservation easement, it seems like one of two things happens. They either get to keep that as an asset in their coffers, or they sell it back to the government. Doesn't that just grind your gears? Government pays them, right, gave them that money to go and buy it, and then they give them money to pay for it back. It's just a racket. And this is one organization. There are 465 accredited land trusts in the United States. But what happens if you can't be bought by organizations like Nature Conservancy? They have another plan for that. It's called a multi-hazard mitigation plan. And this is the climate change aspect and how they plan to move everybody out of rural areas. It's overseen by FEMA, and the purpose of this planning is to identify local policies and actions to implement in order to reduce future risk and loss from humans and natural hazards. In this plan, you will find your local protected lands, along with FEMA's insurance rate map. This is where they partnered with insurance companies to increase rates for homes and future protected lands. Just look to California and Florida, where insurance companies have canceled thousands of policies and they're no longer insuring new homes at all. And you can still be the owner, but you know, what are you gonna do if there's another natural disaster or a fire and you can't pay for it out of pocket? Which brings in their plan to help you. They call it Managed Retreat. Your local comprehensive plans use terms like relocation, resettlement, or realignment. This map shows cities and towns who either relocated a part of their community or their entire town on their own without the help of government. And this is FEMA's map with cities that they've relocated, cities they plan to relocate, or cities are thinking of relocating. How this happens is your state applies for grants through FEMA or HUD to relocate individual property owners or entire towns. Over the past 30 years, FEMA has purchased more than 40,000 homes in floodplains, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has an eminent domain policy specifically for forest managed retreat. So if the government decides that you or your town are in a protected land that requires the relocating, that makes you a climate refugee. And who knows, maybe you can break the law and get away with it too. But where is everybody going to live?
I'm Giacomo Luca in Gridley. It's a project 2.5 months in the making, but now FEMA is putting the finishing touches on a community for 400 families that will house campfire survivors. FEMA crews have cleared the 72-acre site, running underground electric, sewer, water, and paved roads in a project costing in the tens of millions, building essentially an entire neighborhood in just 2.5 months. Survivors will live in these 1 to 4 bedroom housing units that look like this. 300 have already been placed. They'll come fully furnished and will look similar to this inside. FEMA's project manager says crews have exceeded expectations because they know just how important it is.
They're not walking between trailers. They're running from trailer to trailer to jump on the next project.
A government employee running from project to project.
That kind of enthusiasm will help get the project finished on that pace.
For the past 8 months, we've told you stories of those who have lost their homes in the wildfire and have since been living in hotels, shelters, or with family and friends. The first family will move in this afternoon, and a majority over the rest of this weekend.
You're gonna be so excited.
So they're building these now for victims of natural disasters, but is this the green light for them to start building these all across the country without anyone pushing back or questioning it? Because after all, I mean, all of these people have to live somewhere until until the corporations are building their smart cities. Cities like this. This is Tolosa. It's a proposed utopian planned 15-minute city here in the US and owned by billionaire Mark Lorry. He has a target population of 5 million by 2050. The city of the future is based on a reformed version of capitalism and equitism, a new model for society where all wealth is created in a fair way and where all residents share ownership of the land under communism. Oh, sorry, that's a community endowment. All fuel-powered vehicles will be banned. Travel within the city will be focused on walkability, the use of scooters, bicycles, and autonomous vehicles. So I'm guessing we're all a bunch of troublemakers here. So our smart city will probably be owned by FEMA. I don't know everything, but I do know that we'll own nothing and be happy. And if we are at this point of our comprehensive plan, thousands of cities and towns have been relocated. Everyone is living in corporate-owned cities or FEMA camps. So I think it's safe to say our Constitution is gone and our government has been transformed into something unrecognizable. Something like this, because regionalism is the last tactic to be implemented. This rolls up your local elected government into a larger regional planning area, reducing your influence over what regulations are passed or eliminated, along with the authority of local officials to act on your behalf. The goal is to consolidate every aspect of our local, county, state, and federal governments into a worldwide government, or as many of our elected officials call it, a new world order. And although this is the last tactic, it is already happening across the country. With our dispatch centers have been merging with neighboring cities and counties. Fire departments are merging with neighboring cities and counties, as well as police departments, as well as cities and counties merging with neighboring cities and counties. And they say that communities all across the country are running out of money, and to consolidate is our only option, which is partly true, but there's more to the story. What's really happening is something called TIF financing, or tax incremental financing, which is where your city creates a TIF district, allowing the city council to divert property taxes from emergency services into these pet projects. So yes, cities are running out of money, but it's because they're spending that money on something else. And some of these departments across the country that have merged are experiencing much higher cost and chaos that they are working on unmerging. But they don't care, because the goal is a worldwide world under communism. And this is what they have planned for America. We no longer live in the United States because there are no more states. We will live in the Great Lakes mega region, where some people will be allowed to live outside of these mega regions, as you can see on the map, those little circles, but they will still be in controlled smart cities. But if you have a high enough social credit score, you'll be able to travel across the mega regions with the Trans-American Passenger Train. And before you write this off, the COVID stimulus bill and the Inflation Reduction Act allocated billions of dollars to start planning this high-speed rail. Regionalism will look a lot like the European Union and its unelected boards and commissions. And this is all being done through these comprehensive plans. Every county has a plan. Every city within that county has a plan. And then the neighborhoods within that city have a plan. The redevelopment of neighborhoods are being funded through community block grants that your city is applying for through the federal government. And your local city council better not depart from these plans, because they'll freaking sue you. Well, I don't know how to pronounce. I'm not from Wisconsin, so I'm a Texan, and Wauwatosa. There you go. Was just hit with a lawsuit from their city planner because they approved a development that went against the comprehensive plan. And to show you that this is a global agenda, here are comprehensive plans from all over the world. They're all focused on smart growth, agriculture preservation, and environmental protections. Agenda 2030 in America is using smart growth and growth management to build 15-minute cities and then rewild the rest of the American landscape. It's a detailed plan to control and monitor every aspect of your lives. Folks, communism is alive and here in America and will continue to win unless we, the people, unite and put the Lord back in the driver's seat, because without him we can never truly be free. So I am working with residents and council members across the state of Wisconsin to fight this comprehensive plan and to put property rights at the forefront and not the environment. So if this is something you're interested in getting involved in, please see me after. And that's all I have.